Okay, this last week has been a little crazy. Let me bring you back to the moments before I got in the dentist chair and they're about to put my final bridge in place. So I'd been working for 3.5 years, dental appointment after dental appointment to get my front teeth replaced. And finally, we're at that moment. I've gone through so much, and actually, I had identity around missing my front teeth. That was part of the story that was just had to be part of who I am. And I got to this point where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a little sad. I'm never going to be able to use my party trick again. And, I have a great sense of humor about missing my front teeth for 3.5 years. But I had this moment where I was expecting pure relief. And trust me, there was. After the surgery, when I first was able to eat food without having to take my retainer and my front teeth out, it was amazing. I'm like, oh my gosh, life is so simple. Life is so simple now. However, in that moment, I had to acknowledge that there was something underneath that pure joy. It was this grief, this moment of grief. And I'm like, you know what? I've felt this before. I've felt this grief before. A new identity, shedding an old identity and stepping into a new identity. So let me bring you back to a quick introduction of one of my favorite authors. His name is David Hawkins. And he writes about energy levels and emotional states. This is actually something I keep on my office wall. I keep it as a bookmark. It's everywhere. It's such a great reminder for me about choosing my energy and my emotional state wisely. So, one of the things that always stuck with me is that courage is the entry point into personal power. And we're talking about high agency. We're always going to be talking about what is the opposite of victimhood. It is courage. So the things that come below courage on an energetic state are things like shame, guilt, and fear. And courage is the point where you really stop being a passenger in your life. And honestly, every single identity shift that I've been through, I had to choose courage before I could choose the next version of myself. So, I've got three stories that I'm going to tell you and weave in these concepts of courage and self identity that I think you're going to really appreciate. So, for 3.5 years, I homeschooled my children. It was amazing. And 100% being a homeschool mom was part of my identity. It wasn't just a schedule. To me, this was a calling. And there may have been a little degree of unhealthy pride in and ego in that identity. And I didn't really realize that until it came time to let go of that identity as we chose to transition our kids into public school. Completely different lifestyle, completely different schedule. Everything is going to be switched up. My role, my importance, where I thought I was adding the most value, was going to significantly change. So I was I don't want to say forced into it, but I was served up this opportunity to make the choice on a silver platter. So I'll just bring you back to Puerto Rico. We were there for a full month. It was amazing. Unschooling, world schooling our kids. And we got the call one day while we're sitting on this beautiful yacht in the ocean that we had an emergency at our house. A pipe had burst and literally destroyed all three levels and basically everything in the home. Completely destroyed. So at that moment, I realized, obviously, we're going to go home and everything is going to be different. We don't know where we're going to live. I I have a lot of work to do. Who's going to do all it was complete chaos trying to just figure out in that brief amount of time while you're on vacation, how are we going to deal with this? And to deal with first things first, I just let the kids know, like, hey, guys, you know that prison I've been telling you about across the street? Like, you guys are going there. And I said that kind of jokingly, but I just wanted to be honest with them. I wanted to be direct. And we had always joked about, like, because we were unschoolers, we would do one worksheet a day and then go play outside and get dirty and run in the river. And just be wild and free and cut up cardboard boxes and just have the autonomy to do whatever we want. We would build businesses. The kids would come with me on my work appointments. And now, if they would ever complain about that, I would just jokingly say, well, would you rather be stuck in that building for 8 hours a day? And at that time, they couldn't imagine, right? We don't have a house to go back to. And I just don't have the bandwidth to provide a nourishing experience for you. I think my sanity is about to be tested for 2025, and it surely was. So at that moment, I chose to let go of my identity as a homeschool mom. And it was difficult because every conversation I would have with people out in the wild, w- somehow I would mention I'm a homeschool mom. And now that's not part of my story. For a while it was like, "Yeah, I used to homeschool my kids, and that's still part of my story." But it wasn't, my identity was no longer going to be tied to this. So I had to have my moment of grief where I felt a little disoriented. I felt a little lost. I felt a little sad. Like, oh my gosh. And of course, there was some fear in there too. Like, I've been so big on homeschooling. Like, what's this public school experience going to be like? And courage is interesting. I'll say this: courage is the level where you choose to have power. Courage isn't the absence of grief. It's deciding that grief doesn't get to be where you're staying, right? So it's a lot about accepting where you are, what you feel. Like, it is a real feeling, but we're not going to stay there. We're going to feel it and then let it go. So, this whole idea of letting go of an identity, it's like you need to let go of something to make room for what's next, right? And I'm sure you've experienced that in your own life. So, the other story that I want to loop you in on is on a professional level. So, at this time, I'm also, while we're dealing with the loss of our home and where are we living, and that's a whole story for another episode. But I was wondering for myself, like, wow, the schedule's changing. I'm not going to be a residential realtor anymore because my kids are at school. I'm going to try to get my work done while they're at school so I can be with them nights and weekends, right? So the natural fit for me was to step into commercial real estate. And that's something I'd always wanted to do anyways. So I was so excited to finally make that step. And look, when I changed my identity from realtor to commercial broker, let me tell you, not everybody was clapping for me. Okay. There are people in my life that didn't necessarily see that that was a great decision. And look, if you know anyone that's ever tried to transition from residential real estate to commercial real estate, it doesn't always go good for people. It's a huge adjustment. It is a new career. It's real estate, and there's a lot of crossover in skill and network, but it's not necessarily a smooth transition. You're going to be building new pipelines and new relationships, and there's new business acumen, all the things. So wow, I stepped up in courage. It wasn't out of grief. There wasn't grief associated with it. It was more about audacity. Like, you know what? It's time to stop playing small. I don't need this identity of being a residential realtor. There's parts of it that are a little scary to say goodbye to, and it's just part of how people knew me. So, stepping into commercial broker, first of all, I noticed right away when I was able to introduce myself as a commercial broker instead of saying I'm a realtor, people respond differently. There's a different energy associated, and maybe it's just me and the way I was carrying it, but I was like pumped. Like, what? I get to call myself a commercial broker now. Like, this is sick. So, what happened for me in that identity shift was actually within the identity shift, I started out playing a little small, going around my brokerage, knocking on doors within my office, like, what can I help you with? Do you have any projects? Do you have any clients that you want me to help with? And little by little, the other brokers on the team would start giving me clients or assignments or ideas to, hey, just get familiar with the new technology and the new systems and all that kind of stuff. But then it hit me one day because another broker asked me to step in and help him with one of his biggest clients. I was like, "Oh yeah, heck yeah. Like, I'm ready for it. Like, you asked the right person for help. I will not disappoint you." Like, it was such a great opportunity. Shout out to Derek. So Derek invited me to work with one of his clients that's backed by $1 billion company. And I was like, oh, yeah, like I'm in the right room now. And once that happened, being in those rooms and being a part of those conversations and helping that type of client really opened my eyes to the type of business I wanted to build and the type of lifestyle I wanted to build and the types of deals I wanted to do. And stepping into commercial realtor, it's a whole different network, right? So sometimes courage, it's not about climbing out of a hole. Sometimes it's just deciding that you're done apologizing for how high you want to go. And for me in commercial real estate, that was it. The identity shift was like, look, I'm going to be in real estate and I'm going to do like the hardest, biggest things that are available. I'm not trying to climb the ladder, so to speak. I'm just going to choose what is the most difficult niche, what is the highest paying niche, and where can I add the most value. I'm not going to try to just baby step my way up. I'm just going to go for it, right? And that strategy has been working amazing. So, just to tie this all back together, when you step into a new identity, as it was with my teeth, I didn't experience the full joy and relief of having my teeth replaced, my new identity of not being a toothless person. You have to go back and listen to the first episode. Watch it, actually. Watch the video. Then you'll understand what I'm talking about, my teeth, my whole toothless era. So, when I took my first bite of food, and you might laugh at this, it's okay if you do, but it was a real thing. Like every time I had to eat, pop out my retainer, no more teeth, can't bite into a sandwich, can't even bite pizza, got to cut all my food into tiny little bites. But that first moment where I could take food, put it in my mouth, and eat it like a normal person without taking out my retainer and then having to look for where I put my retainer afterwards. That moment, I was like, oh my gosh, I love the new me. I love it. I love having teeth. This is great. I don't miss the retainer at all. And it's the same thing with other identities that I've shed. Like I appreciate the homeschool era. I love it, but I'm not grieving it anymore. I appreciate my residential real estate era, but I'm not grieving the loss of that. Like you move on. And once you're into the new role, the new identity, you no longer really think about like missing the old Amy, the old self. The points that I really love right now that I want to leave you with is that identity loss is real grief and grief is not weakness. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're ready to shift identities or perhaps you're needing to you're served an opportunity and you're kind of forced into an identity shift, maybe you get fired from a job or maybe your company changes roles and shuffles things around. Like sometimes life just serves you these things up, right? But when you have grief, it's not a weakness. So as we bring it home, I just want to illustrate a couple of points that I think are going to be helpful for you as you process identity shifts in your own life or ones that may be things that you're anticipating. So identity loss is real grief and grief is not weakness. So sitting in a low energy, maybe it's confusion or sadness, that's part of it. But I would say that below courage is where we stay when we make grief our identity instead of just a season, right? Courage is actually the fastest way to route from low to high when you get that inspiration. And sometimes the inspiration hits where it's just like if you're jumping off a cliff into water, you get that hit of inspiration and you're just like, I got this. And you just jump, right? So courage can happen really fast. You don't have to go step by step by step. So you can be in fear or apathy and jump straight to courage by just making one decision. And I love that about courage. And it all comes back to accepting responsibility, not being a victim, and choosing the highest perspective available for yourself in that moment. If you only hear one thing, take this away today. Courage is truly when it comes down to it for me, it's about, do you have the courage to look at this from the absolute highest possible perspective? That to me is courage. The way you decide to look at your life, the way you decide to interpret experiences? Do you look at it from a victim lens or do you look at it from a lens of courage and anticipation? So, the final thing I would say is that if you root your identity in some of these things that are fleeting or temporary, at your core, just ask why. Why is my identity rooted in being a homeschool mom? I asked myself that as I was grieving the loss, and I was like, wow, it's because I didn't necessarily believe that I brought enough value without doing that. And that's not true. So my identity was rooted in something that wasn't even true for that season. So I would encourage you to look at your identity. What is your identity rooted in? And something that I've loved with my kids is, if someone tells you like, "Oh, you're so smart, you're so beautiful, you're so this, you're so that," we should really not let that pump us up. If someone says something nice or mean, I don't really want to be affected by it because I want to be so rooted in my own identity that whether someone's saying something positive or negative about me, I don't really want it to affect me. I want to be rooted in who I know I am, with or without the words or affirmations of other people. Even though it can feel good to get accolades from others, my identity is rooted in whose image I was made in. I'm made in the image of perfection. I have love, joy, and peace flowing through me. I have access to divine intelligence